stuffed up in my last video and I was like, I'll see you in 2025. I got the dates wrong. So this will be the last video of 2024 and we're going to be talking about some of my favorite books of 2024. So as I mentioned in my last video, this year was actually a pretty damn good year. I had some excellent books. I really had to try and cut down my list of books that I was going to talk about because otherwise this video would be 3 hours long. So I've just selected a couple of my favorites that I want to talk about, and I tried to pick ones that I guess maybe not as many people would have heard of, because I also had a bunch of like very, very well-known books that I'm like, well, you know this book, like you don't need to hear me talk about it again. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm going to be talking about seven books today, and these were, as I mentioned, I had a really good year, so these were like my real ride or dies. I struggle to think of people who wouldn't like these books, and honestly I think there's only one on this list that I would say most people are gonna like really have be like, well, duh. So the first book I want to talk about is 13 Ways of Looking at a Fat Girl by Mona Awad. I think most people have heard of this author in association with Bunny, which was her like big like smash hit. This is so different from Bunny. So this book is comprised of 13 individual chapters or short stories or vignettes, however you want to describe them. They're told all about the story of Lizzie, who is our protagonist. The premise is very simple. It centers around Lizzie and just follows her through her life as she starts as a young girl and ends up as like a fully grown adult by the end of the novel. What I loved so much about this book is that each individual chapter is told from the perspective of either Lizzie or someone in her life, starting with the first chapter, which is from Lizzie's perspective as her being a young girl who is overweight and kind of struggling to find her footing in life and understand where she fits into kind of the chaotic web of characters within school. I thought the concept of this book was absolutely brilliant and something that I personally have never come across, which is that you get the different perspectives of all different people within this one person's life. So like we have Lizzie's perspective as a younger, bigger girl looking at all like the popular thin girls in school and wondering why she can't be like them. We have the perspective of a boyfriend that Lizzie dates when she's in her teens, and this guy thinks of her really horribly and treats her really horribly and refers to her only as the fat girl. And it's kind of that perspective of how women are taken advantage of by men. There were chapters in here that truly, truly broke my heart. And it says so much about like the diet obsessed culture that we live in and the moral superiority we give to thinness. How that not only affects your own self-worth, but it affects the people around you and how they view you and how they view themselves, and how insidious body dysmorphia is and how it doesn't just affect you, it affects the lives of the people that you love and that live with you. It really delves into the psyche of women and how, as I mentioned, insidious body dysmorphia and diet culture is, and how it just burrows itself in your brain and really doesn't let go. I read this right at the beginning of the year, and what a way to freaking kick off the year. I had read Bunny previously and sort of went into it thinking that this was going to kind of be that similar absurdist bordering on fantasy thing. This is nothing like Bunny. This is unflinchingly honest and realistic. I think it does a fantastic job of talking about how we absorb and internalize all these, like all the fucked up shit you hear about how our bodies need to look, and reflect that back onto other people within our lives. Like throughout the book, Lizzie actually does end up losing weight, but that doesn't change that voice in her head that never says she's good enough. It just becomes a new milestone for you to try and reach. The reviews on this one, when I was looking at it, are incredibly different. Like they're super polarizing. I feel like this is either a book that you really, really love or you really don't love. I am so happy that I was in the camp of people that really do love this book. I think if you have read Mona Awad before and you've read Bunny and you loved her writing, the way she writes is still very similar. It's that very like unflinching, biting, sassy, kind of dry sarcasm, but done in a very, very different format. The next book I want to talk about is one that I'm sure you've all heard of. I was super late to the Emily Henry stan train, but I well and truly bought it at the beginning of 2024. I went through some full-on things in my personal life, and one of my friends recommended Emily Henry as like a really good, gentle escapism kind of novel, and I could not agree more. I binged through her entire body of work in in 1 week. And then Funny Story came out and it became my favorite Emily Henry book of all time. I am actually genuinely shocked that this seems to be a lot of people's like least favorite Emily Henry book. I cannot relate to you in any way, shape or form, because I think this is brilliance in a book. Like, to me, this is an absolute standout. It has a wonderful romance, it has incredible characterization, and it has one of my personal favorite tropes in romance books, which is the fake dating trope. So the plot of Funny Story revolves around Daphne and Miles, who have ended up moving in together through some extenuating circumstances when both of their partners leave them to get together themselves. So Daphne finds herself without a place to live suddenly when her fiance Peter gets with his childhood best friend Petra, who was Miles's partner. That's probably a really confusing way of describing that. But Daphne suddenly finds herself without a home. Miles finds himself without someone helping pay half the rent. So they think, fuck it, let's move in together. When they both receive an invitation to Peter and Petra's wedding, they decide that they are going to try and make it seem like they don't care and they're over it by dating each other. What follows is like the cutest, sweetest, like meet cute style romance. Daphne is very new to the area and Miles loves the area that he lives in, so he tries to kind of make it his mission to also get Daphne to fall in love with the area, and he takes her around to all his favorite spots. I have to say Miles is probably one of my favorite Emily Henry men. I feel like men in romance novels are often portrayed as these like perfect, unattainable standards, and I really liked the fact that Miles at the start of Funny Story seems to kind of be a bit of a loser. Like, you quickly discover that that's not really the truth, but at the beginning of Funny Story, he's this kind of like heartbroken, mopey, weed smoking mess of a man, and he doesn't seem to have a whole lot going for him. And as Daphne discovers that this is not true, you as the reader also discover this. This is the perfect example of opposites attracting. Miles is this very gentle, carefree kind of guy, and Daphne is a very type A kind of personality. I related a lot to Daphne, not just because she's a librarian who loves books, but just because she's a little bit more on the uptight side. I just adore how Emily Henry writes her characters. I think they're so fun and so layered, and they all have flaws that end up helping to drive the conflict that comes further on in the book. It's not like you just get this conflict out, like the third act conflict out of nowhere. Like, it all makes sense leading up to the like main thing at the end because of the flaws that Emily Henry has written into the characters before in the book. The banter between Daphne and Miles is just top tier, absolutely no complaints, cannot fault it at all. And I also loved the concept of two people meeting each other for the first time when they're at their lowest and kind of helping to build each other back up. I thought, like, usually in these romance novels, you've got like one character who's down in the dumps and the other character who helps them like heal and find themselves. I loved the concept of two characters being at their worst and like both of them helping each other to grow and heal and become the best version of themselves. If you haven't read this, or if you haven't read Emily Henry at all, I would highly, highly, highly recommend this one. As I said, this is like apparently in the Emily Henry cinematic universe, like a lot of people's least favorite ones. Personally, I don't get it. I think this is gold, and I would definitely recommend you check this one out. The next book I want to talk about is, again, probably a bit of a more well-known one, and that is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This got a little beat up in the move. I won't lie, she's looking a little worse for wear. This one really kickstarted my love of psychological thrillers. I've not always been like a thriller girly, and this was kind of the first book I picked up in 2024 that really kickstarted that love, and I was like, oh, this kind of eats. So Silent Patient tells the story of Alicia and Gabrielle, who are kind of the picture perfect couple. They're both very much in love. They're both killing it at their respective careers. They're wealthy, they're in love, until Gabrielle comes home from work one day and Alicia shoots him 5 times in the face and then never says a word. So our story begins and we meet Theo, who is a criminal psychologist who has just managed to secure a spot as a doctor at the hospital Alicia is being kept in, and he makes it his mission to try and get to the bottom of what happened and get her to talk. So the story is told in split POV, which I think I've established through this channel I just love so much. So we get the perspective of Theo as like in current day at the hospital trying to work with Alicia and get to the bottom of what has happened. And then we also get past POV Alicia in the lead up to the events that led to her being in the hospital. That was the most confusing way to describe that. The twist at the end really, I did not see coming. It really sent me in the best way, and I was so delighted and shocked when like the twist ending comes. I really can't say a lot about the plot without entirely giving it away, the ending, so I'm gonna just kind of keep what I've said at that. I think this book does such a great job of just like grabbing you by the shoulders right from the get-go, right from page 1, not letting go and just kind of being like, come on, we're going on a little ride together. I found myself entirely consumed by this book. When I wasn't reading the book, I was thinking about the book. I've been thinking about the book ever since I stopped and finished it. I thought the ending was brilliant. I find, as I've mentioned before, a lot of the times with these kind of thriller novels, the ending, like the twist at the end to keep you genuinely surprised, kind of has to be a little bit goofy. This one I thought was so well done, and the way the book is written to keep you as the reader in the dark is just perfection, because I did not see the ending coming. I was so delighted. I literally was like reading it at 2 o'clock in the morning and like sat straight up in bed and was like, what? It's so good. Like if you haven't read this author before, I know he has a couple of other books that are very, very good. I haven't read them yet, but they are on my 2025 TBR. Please pick this up. I think you will hopefully, like I was, be pleasantly surprised. All right, the next book I want to talk about, I'm not gonna dwell on this one too much because I did talk about this in my favorite books of all time video, so it's a surprise to no one that this has made it onto my favorite books of 2024, and that is Bellies by Nicola Dinan. I still don't have my physical copy of this. I did find out the friend that has it. You still haven't read it, by the way, and you should read it. Take this as your sign to read it. So Bellies tells the story of Tom and Ming, who meet at a university party and kind of have an instant connection and fall in love. You then follow them as they finish university and start to move into the next phase of their life when Ming reveals that she's actually going to be transitioning. Bellies succinctly covers like gender, sexuality, love, friendship, loss, grief, the messiness of your 20s, and it packs it into what is a incredibly well-paced, succinct, tight novel that I cannot recommend more. It is stunningly written. The characters are all so layered and complex and beautiful. The relationships between characters are at no stage in the book like shallow or two-dimensional. Like everything is so well thought out. There is not a single character in this book who doesn't have a purpose and a reason for being there. I just, like, if you have one goal for 2025, please make it be to read this book. I just think this book is the absolute bee's knees, and I cannot speak highly of it enough. Nicola Dinan has a new book coming out in, I believe, May next year, and I am so excited to read it. If you want a bit more of a breakdown of this book, go watch my favorite books of all time video. I don't want to bore anyone by breaking it down too much again for people who've watched that. But this book is literary perfection. I love it. It's a 7-star read. The next book I want to talk about is The Inheritance Game by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is a mystery young adult novel that I actually picked up because it was recommended by another booktuber, Lexi, who I love and adore. So The Inheritance Game centers around Avery, who is a teenage girl whose main concern is like graduating high school and surviving the year, when she receives a call to let her know that she's the sole inheritor, seemingly randomly, for billionaire Tobias Hawthorne. The catch is she has to survive a year living in Tobias's crazy mansion with all his family members. Avery pretty quickly discovers that the house is like not your ordinary house, and she kind of locks into trying to work out why Tobias has picked her randomly when they've never met before to inherit his entire fortune when he has a whole family that he's left with nothing. I think one of the things I loved the most about this book is the fact that it is a series. So I think there's 3 or 4 books that continue this series, but you could honestly read the first book, which is what I did, and be completely satisfied. Like, yes, there is a cliffhanger at the end that leads into the sequel. Like, the actual plot of the first book is all kind of finished and wrapped up nicely, so you don't feel like you're wanting for anything. I probably will pick up the second book at some point this year, but yeah, I just enjoyed the first book so thoroughly. I didn't really feel the need to jump straight back into the second one. I love how this book played into like every teenage girl's, or at least my fantasy of like finding out that you have a rich relative and like getting to live your like princess fantasy life. It's giving wish fulfillment. It's giving manifestation. I also loved the fact that it is YA. So yes, there is a little bit of a romance, but it's much more of a subplot. Like, the actual main meat of the plot is the mystery and finding out why Avery has been chosen. I love a good mystery, and this to me very much had the feel of like your old school cozy crime, Agatha Christie, like Cluedo. It also gives like Knives Out vibes. If you are someone who has seen that movie and really enjoyed it, I think this book could be a really good choice for you. The writing, being young adult, is very digestible, but the plot is still really gripping without being like childish. Honestly, there's not a whole lot to say about this aside from it's a absolutely fabulous read. If you are looking for something that's fun, easy, and you could maybe like polish off in a day or 2 during the holiday period, I can't recommend The Inheritance Games enough. The next book I want to talk about is My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. I picked this one up because one of my favorite YouTubers, he does like video essays on TV and movies and stuff. He did a video about books and comics that he thought should be turned into like movies and TV series. The book he mentioned was The Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing, and I was so intrigued by his summary of the plot. I thought it sounded just absolutely fantastic, and I fully agree that this should be turned into a movie. So My Lovely Wife is about a husband who remains unnamed and his wife Millicent and their 2 children, and they kind of have a normal life, a normal picture perfect suburban wife, except the husband and Millicent aren't your normal married couple because they've found the way to keep the spark alive is by kidnapping and murdering women together. This book is demented, it's unsettling, it's creepy. Millicent is one of the best female villains I've seen written in a very long time. The tension around Millicent and just the absolute unhinged creepy nature she gives is unmatched, honestly. And the fact that the husband, who is the narrator of the book, also like kidnaps and murders women, but he feels so much less evil compared to Millicent. The author has somehow spun the husband to seem reasonable in comparison to Millicent. I also think so many of these crime books center around like the detective part, like a crime has been committed and you get the perspectives of like the detectives trying to chase down the bad guy. I thought it was really cool to get the perspective of a murder mystery novel from the bad guys. But I also really liked the fact that a lot of the violence is off page. So it doesn't feel like the author is doing like trauma porn to try and, I guess, use the gratuitous murder of women to sell books. It never feels like that. It toes the line perfectly of being incredibly gripping, but also giving you just enough information to really like set you on edge and give the book the creepy vibe that it has from start to finish. I hope that they turn this into a movie because I think it would be so good, and I think, what is her name, Jessica Chastain, would do a absolutely fantastic job of portraying Millicent, or like Margot Robbie if you dyed her hair red. I can also see Margot Robbie doing a fantastic job. Okay, we have reached the final book I have kind of saved my favorite for last. This is a book by Coco Malors. She's one of those authors that is one of my bread and butters. She's my ride or die, even though she's only written one other book. Like, if she writes anything, I will read it. If she writes a grocery list, I will read it. Anytime she puts pen to paper, I'm gonna read it. So when I heard that she was releasing a new book, I was so excited. At the time, I was working in a bookstore, so I was very lucky to get an advanced reading copy, which is why my cover looks very different to everything else that you'll find. This book is beautiful. This book is phenomenal. So Blue Sisters tells the story of the Blue Sisters. That's their surname. It tells the story of the three sisters, Lucky, Avery, and Bonnie, who have come back together for the first time in 12 months to help pack up their childhood home that their parents are now selling. The sisters had all gone their separate ways after the death of the fourth sister, Nikki, and they've all really individually struggled in their own ways to cope with her passing. This book is awful in the best kind of way. I felt feelings that I didn't want to feel because they were sad and yucky. This book is heartbreaking. It will destroy you from the inside out. I personally have not read many books that I think so perfectly encompass what it is to be and have a sister. It's a very unique relationship that really just cannot be replicated. I actually often wondered when reading this and afterwards if this would actually hit the same for people who don't have sisters. The way Coco so perfectly portrays the absolute roller coaster ride of having a sister, which is you can absolutely hate that person's guts, but also, would I jump in front of a bullet for them? Yes, absolutely. Oh, the characters in this book are just so layered and so beautiful and so well written, and each of them deals with the heart-wrenching grief of losing a sister in their own sadly individual way. Without giving too much of the plot away, I think one of the things I loved the most about this was the way that even though Nikki is not present for any of the book because she's passed away, the stifling shadow that she has left on every one of the sisters is so obvious and present. Her absence has almost become bigger than her presence ever was. I think it's awful, it's gut-wrenching, it's visceral. You feel the weight of her in every page. It's kind of like the insurmountable grief that each sister feels becomes the elephant on every single page of this book. You just want to bundle them all up and hug them and just tell them that it will be okay, but also like it will be okay, but it won't be, because Nikki isn't ever coming back. And that, I think, is the awful, tragic part of grief, that your life grows to expand that grief, but the grief itself never really shrinks. There's something really awful about reading a book and wishing beyond all wish that you could change the outcome of the plot for the characters. I so desperately wanted to jump inside the pages of this book and make Nikki's death not true for the characters. Like, you just want to make it all better, but you can't, and you are just stuck on the ride with the sisters. This book had me sobbing in multiple parts. It's I think I've said enough about how sad it is, but at the same time, it's kind of beautiful as well. Like, I feel like I'm giving this a really bad rap, but it's honestly gorgeous. I very rarely pick up books where from like the first page I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna love this. I just want to read the first part of the prologue of this book because I just think it does such a good job of summarizing the themes of this book. A sister is not a friend. Who can explain the urge to take a relationship as primal and complex as a sibling and reduce it to something as replaceable, as banal as a friend? Yet this status is used again and again to connote the highest intimacy. My mother is my best friend. My husband is my best friend. No, true sisterhood, the kind where you grew fingernails in the same womb, were pushed screaming through identical birth canals, is not the same as friendship. You don't choose each other. There's no furtive period of getting to know the other. You're part of each other right from the start. Look at an umbilical cord, tough, sinuous, unlovely, yet essential, and compare it to a friendship bracelet of tightly woven thread. That is the difference between a sister and a friend. I read that and was like, yep, I'm in, I'm strapped, I'm seated, let's go. I will say, if you are someone who is particularly sensitive or has some maybe traumatic life things that you've gone through, just do your due diligence and check the trigger warnings. There is obviously loss of a sibling, there's child loss in here, there's substance abuse, there's eating disorders, like there's a lot of things that could be really triggering for people. So just, you know, do your research, check the trigger warnings, make sure that this is going to be suitable for you to read and not destroy your soul in like not a good way. Coco Malloy is once again hitting it out of the park. I absolutely cannot wait to see what she writes next. I hope she has another release coming in 2025, because I don't know if I can go a whole more than 12 months without reading something she's written. So Coco, if you're watching this, babe, I'm gonna need you to hurry it up. Just... Okay, so those are my favorite books of 2024. It's actually insane to me that another year has passed. This year has been nuts for many, many reasons. I am simultaneously weirdly sad to see it go, but also very, very happy that this year is over. I can't wait to just say goodbye. Bye 2024, don't let the door hit you on the way out. And I don't know, I feel like the more people I talk to, the more people have had a similar experience. Was there something in the water this year? Like what happened? Anyway, I hope you had a good 2024, and I hope you are looking forward to a new year, excited for all the things we can do, all the books we can read, all the magical adventures we can go on. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for all the support on the channel in 2024. I'm very, very stoked with, you know, this little corner of the internet that I've carved out for myself. Everyone has been so lovely so far and so welcoming, and for that I am very, very grateful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, don't leave a mean comment or I will cry, and this time this is true, I will see you in 2025. Bye.